How much time do you spend actually working in your financial models versus trying to figure out what you did the last time? How easy of a time do other people have when they work in your models? Do they have a million questions or do they just get it? Are you a resource for other people in financial modeling? Do they come and ask you questions? And how accurate are your forecasts? Sure, we're going to be wrong every time, but are you within a couple percent when you do a forecast? So today I have something really special for you, my ultimate checklist for building great financial models. If you run this checklist for every financial model you build, you will quickly be in the top 1% of financial modelers, and you'll be setting yourself right up for that next promotion. If you're new here, I'm Mike. I'm a senior FP&A leader, and over the last decade, I've worked everywhere from brand new startups all the way to the Fortune 100. And over that time, I have done more than 140 different planning cycles. So trust me when I say I've spent a lot of time in financial models. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've also learned what works. In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through my checklist and the most effective steps I've found to build repeatable, usable, and accurate financial models that everybody will want to use and copy. Definitely make sure you stick around to the end because I've got a special surprise I'm going to share with you that you do not want to miss. All that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you want to do to build your financial model is to not touch Excel. That's right, you're not going to touch Excel. Before you ever open up your computer, you want to outline the structure of your model. So here's how I would go about planning out a model. I like to start at both the beginning and the end. So this is going to be our data. And over here, I want to build a P&L model. So I need to get this from here to here. Okay. So in the middle, and this is going to be a very simplified version, but in the middle, I'm going to have a model that takes my data and turns it into a P&L. But I also need an assumptions table that I need to feed in. And I also need inputs from our sales team because they'll tell me how the revenue will grow. So now I know what I need to build. I know that I've already got my data. I have my assumptions. I have my sales. I'm going to feed those into a model, and that model is going to feed over to a P&L. And bonus, as we'll talk about later, the P&L can then turn into summary views. Number 2, label everything clearly. Here we're looking at a terrible financial model. Unfortunately, I see a lot of financial models like this, even in the workplace today. So I've made this laughably bad. I've actually seen some models like this not too long ago. So what's really critical here is that you have absolutely no idea what's going on. There's this little label that says data, but you look over and say, okay, revenue, cost, but then there's more cost. What type of cost is this? You might start guessing it's cost of sales, but it doesn't say. Label everything clearly. Now let me show you what this should look like. Here's what this should look like. I'm on the revenue page right now. You have individual revenue lines broken out. You're showing sales tax calculations. If I come over to my cost tab, it's actually specifically labeled cost of goods sold. There's another tab for labor. You can put in every single service that you're paying for by line. Everything is labeled and organized so you or anyone else using the model can understand what's happening. Number 3, stay organized. Do not run cluttered workbooks. We're looking at this workbook. Everything is on sheet 1. There's data sitting over on the right-hand side. You're trying to build this like chart financial model thing there. There's an assumption in the top right corner saying inflation is 4%, but it's also just kind of typed in there like, what on earth is this? It's critical that you stay organized. So what does staying organized look like? Well, if you look here, we have different tabs. Each tab is labeled for the purpose. I'm currently on settings, and you can see that all of the global settings are laid out here nicely with labels and instructions. I can see that I have my assumptions tab. I've got dashboards. I've got some different reporting here. I come back to data inputs, and this is where all of my data lives. So we have the revenue tab. Everything is organized. The flow that I use is I have at least 3 types of tabs in every model. I'll have my raw data tabs where I am bringing in data. I'll have my input and assumption tabs, and I will have my modeling tabs. Now, In some models like this one here, which is a full 3-statement model, I might have multiple tabs to kind of split up the information because there's so much. But no matter the size of the model, even if it's just a quick ad hoc analysis, I'll always have at least those 3 tabs: data, inputs and assumptions, and a place for modeling. And you want to always keep those separate to stay organized and so you can follow a process flow. Number 4, simplify complexity. Fancy formulas, 10 nested functions, this stuff does not impress people and it makes your model hard to use. The simpler your model, the more it reduces the chance of error. And honestly, in a lot of cases, adding all these extra calculations and metrics, it's a rapidly declining return on your time and on the accuracy it gives you. So in everything you do, simplify. Simplicity is an art form, and true experts in finance run some of the simplest processes you could imagine. Number 5, check your data sources. Just because someone sends you a data file doesn't mean it's accurate. You want to have kind of a master file or master files that you can look at to validate if the data is directionally correct. Of course, you won't know if every part of it is correct. That's why we have to trust our systems, but you can validate if the data set makes sense, if it aligns with other things. Look for prior decks, and if you're seeing major changes to historicals, the data might not be right. Understand the system that it came from and make sure that that system really reflects and holds all of the data you need. Just make sure that no matter who sends you the data, that you're trusting them, but that you're validating and verifying the data on your own. If you're enjoying this video so far, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. It helps the channel grow and it helps me put out the best content for you every single week. I really appreciate it. And if you've made it this far, make sure to keep sticking around to the end because I've got a really special surprise to share with you. Number 6, keep data updated. Looking at this terrible file, where did this data come from? We see stuff from 1/1/2023, but when did we get this data? Is this the freshest data? Is there newer data? We have absolutely no idea. So aside from just making sure that you are keeping your data updated, something that I really like to do is to put when I last loaded data right into the file. So if you'll look here in general settings, we have data last updated. And this is nothing fancy. You're just going to simply come in here and say, I last updated this on November 1st, 2024. And there you go. Ignore the percentage. That just kind of popped in there, and there you go. It really is that easy. 11/1/2024 was the date this was last updated. No matter who gets the file, they now know when this was updated. You need to validate your inputs. You need to make sure that numbers are numbers, that text is text, and that all of your inputs are right and as they should be. So taking a look at this terrible file, so we see -4,000 sitting here, and that is clearly not correct. So what could we do as a quick way to fix this? Well, one thing you can do is you can use data validation. If you're looking for something specific to be in the cell, you can go to data validation. We'll say allow any whole number greater than 0. Okay, so now if I came back to type this in, let's say -4,000, it's going to reject it because I need it to be greater than 0. This is a great way to go through the file and make sure if something just literally cannot sit in that cell, if it has to be a date, if it has to be a number, restrict the access to that cell so you can only put in what you need to. Next, number 8, document the sources. List where you got the information from. A couple of really bad examples in here. You'll see up in the top left, inflation is 4%. Well, great. When was it 4%? What country is it from? So many different things you don't know. And then data, really descriptive. What system is it from? When did you pull it? We have absolutely no idea. So first of all, let me come over here to my settings tab. So what this might look like is if we come here next to income tax rate, I'll do something just as easy as this. Provided by corporate tax on November 1st. Oftentimes there's other partners who are going to give you these things, and you can just say when you got that. We can come over here to assumptions, and we see the base interest rate 7%. Well, that's going to come from corporate treasury. It's a little bit older, but we got it, let's say October 15th. And if you're pulling in any macroeconomic assumptions like inflation, list the source where you got it from. So if people need to update it, they can go back to that same source. If there's any questions, you know what source that you can go back to. It's that easy of just saying, hey, this is where I got the data from. And if you want to look at the data sets in general, I like to mark these as well. We could come to revenue and say, pulled from Oracle on November 1st. So we pulled from our Oracle financial system on November 1st. There you go. I'd love to hear where you're struggling with financial modeling. So go ahead, leave a comment, and let me know where you have questions, where you're struggling, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. I read and respond to every single comment. Number 9, be realistic in your assumptions. If your business is currently growing at 5% a year, it's not going to grow at 20% next year unless something absolutely crazy happens. Your business might grow at 6, 7, 8%, if you put in new strategies, but things aren't going to change that dramatically. You're not going to have half of the workforce that you do in a year. You have to make sure that the assumptions you're making make sense. And anything you're pulling, again, from outside the company, cost of financing, interest rates, inflation, that you're pulling from reliable sources, either from governments or universities or official organizations that track this, because you want to make sure all your assumptions are reasonable. Now, once you have these reasonable assumptions, you come to number 10. And number 10 is to list your assumptions. Looking at our lousy workbook, I guess you could say we've listed the assumption of inflation is 4%, but that's it. And you're just saying inflation is 4%. This is what you want. You want a clear list of all the assumptions you made. You can see we're looking at the capital assumptions. They're all listed out. Computers last 3 years, office fixings last 10 years, right? I would come in again to the point and say, this comes from IRS publication because we're getting the depreciation from IRS publications, but you're going to list out all of your assumptions so everybody knows what you're assuming. It's clear, and trust me, you will forget too. Even if you think you're the only one who will use this file, which you should never assume that, you will forget too. Trust me, I have forgotten what I did plenty of times, and I'm so thankful when I leave notes like this. Number 11, you have to review your assumptions regularly. Inflation is constantly changing. Interest rates are constantly changing. The IRS might issue new guidance for depreciation. Your revenue growth might be changing. Your market assumptions might be changing. Anything could change. So you have to review this on an ongoing basis, preferably monthly if things are changing a lot, but at least quarterly, you need to be reviewing all the assumptions in your models to make sure that they still make sense. Number 12, you want to test scenarios. What this means is that you don't just assume one case, you assume kind of a high, medium, or low case, also known kind of as best, middle, and worst case. This allows you the opportunity to understand where things could go really well, where things could go wrong, and to pivot the business as you go to help them take action to move towards whatever the best case scenario is and away from the worst case. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. I have a great video on scenario planning in Excel, which I'm going to link right here. Make sure to check that out, but you need to know that scenario planning should be built into every model you do. Because remember, every forecast you ever do will be wrong. Every forecast I've ever done has been wrong. That's where scenarios are so important to help understand kind of the bounds of what is most likely to happen and where you're tracking versus that. Let's come back to our crappy model and show why it is so important to visualize with charts. So we've got our data set here, and let's go ahead and visualize this. Let's just do this on a line graph. Oh crap, we have a problem. Look at this. Income is skyrocketing in week 3. What is going on? Well, it looks like somebody typed in 150,000 when they meant 15,000. Now, looking across it, well, I kind of did see it, but looking across, you might not see some of these small changes. They can be really subtle sitting in the file. 150,000 was quite obvious, but looking at charts, you can see where things are really off. Now that I've fixed that, look what else we're seeing. Your cost gets really screwy in week 2 because there's that negative sign sitting there. You delete out that negative sign, and now you start to get some clearer trends that you can analyze. So even in this terrible file, just adding charts to your forecasting models allows you the ability to see if anything doesn't make sense. Now, sometimes those outliers do make sense. We could say here that week 3 was a holiday week or something changed fundamentally that drove up revenue, drove up cost. People were out spending more money. There might be things that make sense, but what you want to do is to visualize your forecast and not just look at giant walls and charts and trends of numbers, because it's easy to get lost in the numbers, but it pops out so fast in a chart. Next, number 14. Build error checks into your files. Yes, you do want to tick and tie and double check everything when you're done, but why do all of the work when Excel can do some of the work for you? And that's why I love building in error checks. So even in this terrible file, what that can look like is we'll come down here, we'll have an extra row called error. So this is a row you can easily come up here, kind of group this because you're going to be able to hide it later. But let's come to error. We're going to italicize this to show that it is not part of the model, and we'll make it red. And then what you do is you're going to just check different things to make sure that they make sense, that totals kind of foot across pages, that everything you're doing makes sense. So in this case, we're going to do revenue minus the costs minus the calculation should be 0. Awesome. Uh-oh, good thing we checked. If you look right here, a number's off. So this does not foot. See, this got manually hard-coded where everything else is a formula. So we have to go back, drag the formula in, and now it works. And let's say that you had, these values, like just the income sitting on another page or on one of those source files I mentioned that you want to tie out against. You can also link these back to those and make sure that they stay the same over time. And lastly, number 15, include instructions, not just for other people, although that's really important, but for yourself, because again, you will forget what you've done. I still forget what I've done in models, and I'm always so thankful for instructions. Now, there's 2 ways you can add instructions. Here's the first way you can add instructions of just a table saying, here's how the model works. Here's what my color coding means. Here are the contents of the table. Here's the basic structure and how the model flows so you know what order to update it in. That's part 1. The second one for instructions is you can go into a cell and leave a comment. The second option is you can go into any cell and leave a comment. And I am a big fan of comments. So let's go to this other one. And let's say that I didn't want to change the title to other one, but I'm using this for something in the file that I wanted to note. So we're going to go to insert, we're going to go to comment, and I'm going to say, this category is being used to track new business. Now, if it's only being used for new business, I would obviously change it to new business, but just as an example, I'm leaving a note for myself saying, I am using this for something. You can come to any part of the business and say revenue KPIs. All right, we're going to go insert, comment, and say the definition of this KPI is, and then you can leave what the definition is. So anywhere where you might be unclear on what it will mean in the future, or where someone else might be unclear, you can leave an additional comment right at the source to supplement this overall introduction. Now, you don't need really complicated instructions on like small ones. You have to scale all of these tips based on what you're working on. The main forecasting model for your department needs a lot of instructions, a lot of comments. A quick ad hoc analysis might just leave a note on the assumptions page saying, key things to look out for and how it works. But leaving instructions is so critical both for yourself and for those who come after you. And now I am so excited to share with you that special resource I promised. I've got for you a free download of my checklist that goes right along with this video. So you can print this out or put it on your desktop and have it available for you. And literally, even today, even after going through over 140 cycles, I still go down this one every time I do a model, no matter how short, check all the boxes and make sure that I'm hitting it. Think about the fact that, airline pilots fly every day. It's their career. It's what they've trained to do. It's what they do every day. And they still use checklists because it's important to just have these processes down, because then you're not thinking about it. You're spending your time on making the forecast as good as possible, on getting all of the assumptions and the adjustments and the drivers in there, and on supporting the business to drive it forward. Because remember, the forecast is just a tool to drive the business forward. So go ahead, down in the description, you'll find a link straight over to get this free download. I'll also send you my weekly newsletter, Finance Unfiltered, where I share top tips for automating your career and automating your workflow to save time and get promoted. If you take away just one thing from this video, it's that financial modeling is a process. And in this process, you want to be organized and you want to have support for your data. You want to know where everything comes from and what everything does without thinking. Do not rely on your memory to remember how a model works. All of this functionality is built right into Excel. Use that functionality to your advantage. You will thank you, your future self will thank you, and anyone who comes after you will thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. That will really help me out, and I would really appreciate it so I can continue bringing you the absolute best content every single week. That's it for today. I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, this is Mike signing off from F9 Finance. Cheers.